And this consulting firm was like, we need somebody to actually do air sampling of these big, intimidating guys in the projects. And guess who they sent? Obviously, they thought it would be smart to send me, this tiny little Hispanic girl.
Welcome to the Canary Report, the podcast where risk leaders, safety professionals, and operational executives come for real-world stories and smarter strategies to keep people safe. I'm your host, Michael Zhao. In each episode, I sit down with exceptional leaders who are transforming how risk and safety are managed. Whether you're a leader of a nationwide EHSS program in a high-risk industry, or you champion workplace safety across 200 retail locations, this podcast is for you. Let's get into it. Welcome to the Canary Report, a podcast where risk leaders and safety professionals and operational executives come to share real-world stories, smart strategies, and things that keep people safe at work and beyond. I'm your host, Michael Zhao, founder and CEO of Yellowbird. Today, we have Jo Pina joining me. She is an extremely accomplished and impressive safety professional. I have been looking forward to this for so very long. Jo's background includes 20 years of experience, which is hard to believe, of environmental health and safety, leading roles in sectors that are public infrastructure, utilities, energy, construction of safety. She is a leading thought leader in women in safety excellence at WISE. She's a member of ASSP and a very active member and on many different boards. And she's an advocate for mentorship, inclusion, and psychological safety in a high-risk world. And I am honored to have you. So thank you for joining us.
Thank you. That was very impressive. I'm impressed. Who is Jo Pina?
Well, she's amazing. I told you before we started, I'm going to give your intro and you're going to get embarrassed. And then we're going to have a chat. It happens every time.
I'm blushing. I think I'm blushing.
Well,
Thank you.
Good.
That was very kind. Thank you for that introduction. You said a lot of things there that I'm very passionate about. So I'm so glad we have this opportunity to chat.
Likewise. And as I said on our initial call, when I reached out to you to join me on the Canary Report, I have known of you, been around you. We've seen each other at events very momentarily. We said hello, but we've never actually talked until that last discussion and then this one. And so it's kind of hard to believe since we've both been in this industry and in and around for so very long. I guess my first question to kick it all off is, on a personal note, can you tell me about who you are beyond the thought leader in safety and all the things you do professionally? Tell me about your life, your personal life, and your journey, your family, your all that good stuff. You don't have to get too personal if you don't want to.
Yeah, no, it's okay. Full transparency, right? That's who we are. So thank you for asking that question. I don't really answer that question very often. I'm not asked that question. I feel like sometimes we jump right into business, right? And I appreciate you asking that question because a lot of who we are as professionals has to do with who we are as people. And I would say that I have a very interesting background. So I'm Dominican. If you didn't know that, now you know. And I grew up in the Dominican Republic. I was actually there in the Dominican Republic 2 days ago. So that's why I look like I'm glowing because I have a pretty good tan right now going for myself. So yeah, I was just there and it felt so good to be back because those are my roots. That's where I come from. I went to school there. I came to the States when I was 9 and went directly to New York City. So I'm very proud to say this. I am a product of New York City public school education. Sometimes you think so much about, how your kids are performing and all this and all that. And to be honest, even if you send your kids to public school, they'll be okay. I'm very proud of that I survived that public school education in New York City. And then I went to school in Vermont, and that's when I was introduced to the sciences. And I love the sciences. I love biology. And then came out here to this side of the world I went to California, hung out with a few friends, just like any other 20-year-old. Had fantastic time, Mission Beach in San Diego. Went to San Diego State for my master's, and I've always been a very independent woman and girl. As a matter of fact, I think I gave my dad a lot of headaches because even throughout my teens, I always wanted to, quote unquote, make my own rules. And so for the fathers out there that have very empowered bravado girls, hang in there. They'll turn out okay.
You're speaking to one of them. I always say my 16-year-old, and I love her dearly, and she's the light of my life, and she will never do anything that she doesn't want to do, which I absolutely love as a father who worries about his little girl. But if she decides to do something, God help me, I will not be able to stop her. And so there's always a double-edged sword to that strong-willed nature. So I do absolutely understand. So okay, so you're in San Diego. You're in San Diego doing your thing, and then and went to got your master's. What was your master's in? What did you study?
It was actually urban planning.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah, I was very interested in infrastructure. Very interested in infrastructure, and I think when I was in school, I was trying to find how I can fit my passions. So I'm very passionate about the natural environment. I'm also passionate about construction. Like I love buildings and infrastructure and how it all comes together and the science of it all. As a matter of fact, when I was a little girl in the Dominican Republic, we didn't have a lot of resources. So my toys were blocks and balls and bringing these complex infrastructures with whatever I can, two by fours, putting them together to create some sort of, city.
That's cool.
Yeah, you know what? It doesn't have to be expensive, right? That's the beauty of being a child. You can give your child, whatever resources you have around you, and they'll come up with something. I think nowadays we make it too easy for kids. Kids should be bored. Let's keep them bored for a little bit and see what they come up with.
Make them find their creativity. I agree with that. I agree with that. And then so you graduated with civil engineering from or is that correct? For your master's in
Urban planning.
urban planning, excuse me, urban planning. And then where did you go from there? What was how did you end up in the safety world? Like how did that migrate? Because that's a different path.
Yeah, it is. It is a different path, but not so very different. So I started working for a consulting firm as an environmental planner. And because I did have from my 4-year degree in Vermont, I have a degree in natural resources management. So I wanted to bring the natural sciences to it's a strange connection, but I wanted to bring the sciences to planning. And then I found that there's an environmental planner position out there, or there was, and I started working for a consulting firm as an environmental planner. But then I found it too kind of rigid. I wanted something a little more fluid, a little more temperamental, and that's when I thought, let's throw people in there. Let's throw people in the mix, and I was introduced to occupational safety and health. So I started working for another company as their environmental health and safety coordinator. And then that just took me down this 20-year path of environmental health and safety and now security that I'm responsible for now. But I think the point of that is that it's not a straight line for many of us safety professionals. Like we find ourselves in this profession, but it's never, from what I've heard from others, is never a straight line.
It's such an interesting statement, and I didn't know this in your story, so this is actually going to be very interesting because I've got some questions and anecdotal things that will come from your story. But I always say that to my kids. I said, unless you're going to be something that is very much well structured, where you're going to be a doctor, you're going to be a lawyer, you're going to be an accountant, That's a very long,
Oh boy.
that's a linear, but it's a very linear, the path.
Uh-huh.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that there is a path. There is a, you need to take these classes, you're going to go this undergrad generally, and then you're going to go apply to schools, internships, everything else. Most people get their first job with whoever's hiring, and hopefully it's a fit and it matches your passion and your ideas or whatever else. And it starts you down a path. And before you know it, you have either gone down that path or you've pivoted, but there's really no straight line in most people's careers. If you really talk about it, it's true in safety for sure, unquestionably, but it's really true in most careers. It's like as you're going down, it's like, hey, I met a guy and he was at an event and he said, hey, we need somebody like, I need somebody like you. And all of a sudden, you've gone from working in construction to doing solar energy farms. And it's like, and you're like, how did that happen? And a lot of the time, it's just because you are open to accepting opportunity. And that's what I say to my children, at least, and other people I mentor. It's like, be open, just listen, and don't be always looking, because then you're going to do a disservice to whoever you're serving, working for today. But always be willing to at least say, huh. It never hurts, right? So you were an you were an EHS coordinator when you entered this
Oh yeah.
journey. And so
Many years ago.
right. Well, you know what? But it's funny because that role is generally the beginning of most people's journey, whether it's a coordinator or uh, a second job of your primary job, which most people started that way, which is like, we don't have a safety leader, who's willing to do it, and somebody raises their hand, and that's kind of how they find the passion for it. And so you kind of understand uh, the logistical aspects, the challenges of executing a good program, like actually being good at, running a program that's not. I'm not a big compliance guy. I think at OSHA is a minimum standard. You can, I always say you can survive on 200 calories a day, but you're not actually healthy, but you can survive on that. And in my opinion, a lot of the standards are, yeah, it's a minimum requirement. We need it in order to say being fined but there's a level of proper human safety and occupational safety that we should all aspire to, that's far beyond that minimum requirement. So through that lens, so you were a coordinator for what kind of organization, and then where did you go from there?
Yes, yes, yes. And you know what? It's very nostalgic because when you think about where you started, and I think this will resonate with many of our listeners, thinking back to that first job where you felt challenged, and you think about all the adversity that you encountered and how you overcame that, and you just think back and you just smile because it was so big back then, and the fact that you overcame all of those challenges to help you be who you are today. It's very nostalgic. I think back to my early coordinator days with a smile because I had a lot of bravado. I had a lot of bravado when I was that age. But to answer your question, so I started working for this company called Western National Group. And I think of my time fondly there because I was very fortunate to work with this exceptional woman. Her name is Cindy Bright. She was a force to reckon with. I mean, this woman is formidable. And I was always a little intimidated, but I think it's important to have strong women leaders because you learn and grow differently than a strong male leader. So that was I thought I was very fortunate to have a very strong woman presence in the beginning years of my career. So I worked for Western National Group, and Western National Group is a company with several umbrellas. So we had construction, landscaping, and property management, or we have because they're still operational. And my job was and they have apartments, right? So my job was to support loss control, loss prevention, and the environmental aspect of it. So I was introduced into things like lead and asbestos and mold and lovely bed bugs. So I had a very, very strong background in biological safety, right? The physical safety aspect of things. And I also did some construction. So I would go to our construction sites and actually do physical inspections. And that was so rewarding for me as a coordinator because I was introduced to so many different aspects of safety at a very early age. Because this was back in 2004, I think is when I started with them. And they also had landscaping. Landscaping was very interesting, high hazard. We had tree trimmers, and I was responsible for developing a hearing conservation program as a coordinator. So talk about that's why I smile when I think back because when you're given, and thankfully my boss, she felt confident that I could do the job. When you're given such a huge program, I mean, we're talking about audiometric testing and, grabbing dosimeters and making sure they're calibrated and the, time weighted average calculations. I mean, this is not an easy, it's almost as bad as respiratory protection, right?
So let me ask you, are you actually an industrial hygienist by training, or did you go through the process? I always ask this question because that's all IH, and yet people go, "Oh, I need a CIH." Are you actually a CIH, or when you were doing that, you did the studies, you learned the best possible procedures, and executed well? I always wonder this because people are like, "Oh, if I don't have a CIH, then I'm gonna not be able to do this kind of work." And I say, well, not necessarily, as long as your organization will support you and you're doing it properly. Were you a CIH at that point?
No, I was not at all. But you know what? And you said something very important. As long as you do it properly, you have the ability to create these programs and conduct your tests based on what the requirements are. And as long as you are confident you're doing it correctly. So prior to this, actually, and you bring back IH. So I did a little bit of IH in New York City, and I don't really talk about this very much. So this is new information. So
Awesome. Oh,
when
we got
I
a scoop.
when I
We got a scoop.
yeah. So when I graduated college, this was back in oh God, I don't want to age myself, but in the late in the well actually in the early 2000s, very early 2000s. I took a job and recent graduate, I was 21, recent graduate, and I took a job working for a consulting firm in New York City. I don't really talk about this very much because I didn't stay there for very long, but one of the things that they had me do was conduct air sampling of these projects. So these very big muscular painters were doing a project in the projects in New York City. And this consulting firm was like, we need somebody to actually do air sampling of these big, intimidating guys in the projects. And guess who they sent?
Wait, air sampling of these people or the environment they're working in?
Well, the environment they're working in, but we needed to, yeah, right. But we needed to put air samples, like air monitoring gadgets on them, like the big sampling gadgets with the hose and the dish and everything else. And but I didn't have anybody to send, so obviously they thought it would be smart to send me, this tiny little Hispanic girl, and I remember how heavy my toolbox was. It must have been about 60 pounds, and at that time, I was like 110 pounds, so it was almost as heavy as I was. But it was so funny because I would go into these projects, which, I mean, we're talking about the late 1990s, early 2000. They're in the best place for a young girl to be in. But I mean, I was in there putting air monitoring gadgets on these guys, and that was my first introduction into industrial hygiene. Actually,
That is fascinating. So,
I still remember that.
yeah. Do you recall the reason? It's funny because everybody now, post COVID, has a new respect for air sampling and surface sampling and industrial hygiene testing. I mean, it's the science behind COVID-19 and the reopening strategies. And nobody knew what it was back then. What were you testing for at that point? Do you recall what was the reason you were putting those in place?
VOCs, volatile organic compounds. There you go. From the paint.
From the paint. So they wanted to just make sure that people weren't being exposed to too much paint. Very, very fascinating. It's interesting because as I have these conversations, it's why I love doing this. I get to learn about what people's journeys were really like. And, I always say when we're doing stuff with Yellowbird, if I had to send somebody out to do that, how would I know that they were capable of doing that job and being exceptional at it? How do you set the right expectation? How do you make sure that they're the right person and so on and so forth? And you think, oh, well, you just look for an industrial hygienist. Well, knowing your background, having this kind of information as interviews and other things go on through the onboarding process, it'd be interesting because you actually know a heck of a lot more than a lot of IHs do because you've done this kind of work. And it's just such an interesting example of how people in this industry tend to paint a book or judge a book by its cover, both physically, as you and I will get into in a moment, but also that just because you have a certification doesn't mean that you're competent. And just because you say just because you have it listed on a resume or that you say, I know how to do that, how do people actually know that you do? It's hugely challenging. So, and then you have, of course, everybody's good old boy club that makes it even more difficult, which you know better than anybody. I've actually worked very hard on the platform to not show any level of gender, ethnicity, background that would impact people's willingness to select a professional. And everybody's like, well, that doesn't make sense. I mean, some people would recognize me by my face. I said, yes. And that's the problem. I want them to recognize you. I want to match you based on your talent and your capabilities and your wisdom, not based on your face. And I've had this debate. Some people are upset with me about it. And I said, I don't care. I don't believe that you should be leading people by their gut. You should be leading people by their data, and then have the gut support it. So transitioning, because I know you're very passionate about both equity and mentorship of young ladies, as well as getting people into this industry and not having the good old boys club or men, decide for you what it is that you can or cannot do, which I love. As a father of a young lady and somebody who I want to be able to do anything she wants to do without any barriers, what have you found that's practical, not emotional it's obvious, but what have you found from talking to people about how they act, and from a women's perspective, from a WISE perspective? I mean, WISE, by the way, Women in Safety Excellence, is a fantastic organization. Anybody who's listening here who has a female that's involved in safety, please, or male. Like, I'm actually a WISE guy. I signed up as being supporting the WISE community. But what have you found to be common themes and things that we can kind of promote here on the podcast on how to help women advance their careers in this environment?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. And I think it's important to have the conversation. And I felt a lot of resistance in my past when it comes to the posts I've made about women. I got Abby in trouble. Abby is a really good friend of mine because I posted the safety future is female. And I felt like people lost their mind. Like, oh man, I had so many interesting comments posted just because I mentioned
What's wrong with that?
the safety, that the safety future is female.
What were the comments? Like, I don't understand why anybody would even have a problem with that. Like, really, I mean, at the end of the day, so I don't want to know exactly the comments because this is still a PG show, but what were the sentiment that you were hearing about that, I can't even guess what was said. So can you give me some insight into what was said?
Yeah, well, I think the sentiment, and this was a minority. The minority is sometimes distracting. Most of the people were embracing of that comment. And it was more in jest, just to push people's buttons, because sometimes we do need to be uncomfortable. And when I first started the profession, I think women were only 10% of the profession at that time. I know it's gone up. I think that there's some people out there who feel like there's no reason why there should be a differentiation between women and men. It should be safety is for all. And I can understand that statement, but when you look at the statistics and you see that women make only 10% of the profession when I first started, safety is not for all, because you're only allowing 10% of this specific gender or sex to be in the profession. So clearly there's an opportunity there to improve. And the post was intended to trigger conversation. I do think that safety is for all. Anybody could enter the profession, but the profession benefits when there's diversity. And there's just it is what it is. We benefit more from diversity in the profession. And I've seen the difference. Women bring a certain level of certain soft skills that are important for the safety profession, and just like men bring their own level of importance and value. So I think it's important to keep an open mind and make room for others in the safety profession. I just wanted people to make space for others to enter into the conversation.
It's kind of interesting because, I was shocked. I have not been in this industry as long as you have. I've been around this industry for 30 years, but I've been in this industry for about 12 or 13, like really active and participating. But if you look at the leadership of all the major organizations in the country, so you look at NSC, you look at ASSP, you look at BCSP, the top people are all women, and which is wonderful. And if you look at some of the most, I don't know on the association side of any other industry that is actually making as much. I would think we have a long way to go. Don't get me wrong. And believe me, I'm not saying that game is done. But I will say it's actually really refreshing when you look at if you look at the leadership chart on, say, Christy at BCSP or any of the folks, and you look at their org charts, they're mostly female, which is great. Now, the question is why aren't the people doing the job at the edge more female? And how do we and a lot of it, frankly, comes, in my opinion, and this is just my 2 cents, and it could very much be wrong, is because of what we started with, which is you started this industry as, hey, who wants to be the safety person? And somebody goes, I will, and they raise their hand. And in a male-dominated industry like construction, which is what it is, I'm not making a statement regarding if it should be or shouldn't be. Actually, I am. It shouldn't be, but it is. Who's going to raise their hand? The probability statistically is that the person that does that's going to be a man. And just because that's the pool you're dealing with. And so I think as the workforce gets more level and more equal, than the people who raise their hand to go into this, and the industry gets better, we have more educational workflows. I actually don't know the statistics, so I shouldn't even bring it up because I'm not really a person who talks about data unless I have it in front of me. But I'd be curious to go to like some of the universities that have very, very strong safety programs, and see what the next generation looks like from a percentile of women and men, of different ethnicities, backgrounds, all that stuff. And I'm hopeful, and I have no idea if it's true, but I'm hopeful it's better than it was 10 years ago. So but I'm such an internal optimist. For me, I just do
I
it.
love
I
it.
just do what I can do. I try to give I try to give exposure, and that's what my whole business is about. My business is about exposure, that people can enter and do different things and be able to contribute into our world without having to draw a line in the sand. Like, nobody ever said, well, if you wanted to drive a vehicle and become an Uber driver, you have to decide right now, you have to do that. But in my world, we could do 500 safety surveys across the country, and I could train somebody on how to do that survey and have somebody oversee that to make sure it was done well. And you don't have to be a 30-year seasoned person to do it. Like some of these things, I think, in my opinion, we're using too senior of people to do jobs that are not necessarily required to do that senior of folks. So moving into the business side of things a little bit, unless there's anything else you want to touch on any other subjects, like I don't want to lead you down a path. But on the business side, you said that you're really into systematically and programmatically creating safety processes and best practices. So tell me about that. Tell me about your philosophy around these systems and what works, what you've seen works, how you implement them, all that good stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm really into strategic thinking and strategic planning, and I think it's something that is not taught. When you take the CSP exam, they don't talk about objectives and key results, but the business talks about objectives and key results, and that's something I learned when I worked for tech. The importance of aligning whatever it is that you're creating your agenda as a safety professional to the business need. Because if you don't align to the business, then you don't become relevant. So, how do we help safety professionals understand the business, understand their value, and be able to articulate that to operations, to the C suite? And I think that's something that I didn't learn in school or when I was studying for my exams. It was something that I learned the hard way, right? Really demonstrating what is your value? What do you bring to the company? How can you quantify your results, right? What are your KPIs? How are you performing? So that aspect of the safety profession, I feel like we don't really do a good job teaching. So I want to go down a path, not that I'm the expert, but really understanding strategic planning and how to communicate your value, not just, in a intrinsic way, but something that's quantifiable to the business. Yeah, we can talk about, okay, I'm saving you XYZ amount, but what else do you bring to the company?
Right. It's such an interesting conversation, and where I find the challenges is I've asked everybody, and I'm going to ask you too. I'm going to ask you, but I'm not going to have you answer. You can ponder it, which is if you were to track KPIs, what KPIs would you track that you feel could be a cross company that has historical data and value to be able to judge if you're improving? And how do you do an ongoing improvement process around that? The reason and don't have to answer right now, it's a big question and it's kind of a deeper question, but I find that, the history, most people don't understand the history of our industry. In the 70s, we needed a safety manager, and then somehow it became a health and safety manager, and then it became environmental, which is like not environmental as in earth, but environmental as in your environment, like around you, breathing, hearing, all that kind of stuff. People often don't understand that as they're like, really? It's like, well, now they put the earth as part of it. Then you became sustainability was thrown in there, quality was thrown in there, and budgets are being at training often is underneath all sorts of training beyond just safety, and budgets are being cut. And it's like, how do you expect this small team of people to be able to execute this large and growing catch-all program with accountability that is unrealistic? Accountability I believe that the accountability put on the reason safety professional turnover is so high is because organizations will literally blame the safety leader for an injury or for an incident. And you're like, how do you expect one, two, three people to properly avoid 12,000 people's incidents? It just isn't realistic. And so I always go back to the basics where it says, okay, well, you can't expect what you don't inspect. So how are you running inspection programs? How are you doing programmatically independent inspections, which is what we do a lot of, which is let's just go out and see how people are doing. Give us the scorecard. We have no dog in the hunt. So there's no bias from us. We will literally go out and say, okay, are people wearing fall protection gear? Yes. Do they have eye wash stations? Yes, but they're full of nuts and bolts. Right?
Right.
As you're going through and all these things. So going back to the KPI question, which is what it all kind of comes from, in our world and in the world you've lived in, what is the most impactful KPI that you think we should be monitoring, that we should be looking at as safety professionals?
Wow, that's a loaded question. How much time do we have? Do we have enough time?
Probably not, but you can always give directional guidance, or we could move on, which is fine. But I am curious, like, what if you said, okay, to see if a company is being run well from a safety perspective? Yes, you can go with their OSHA numbers, you can go with their incident reports or their mod rate on their insurance. But as practical people, what should we be looking at?
You know what? That's a very good question, and it's multi-layered because first you need to understand where the company is on the spectrum of maturity, safety maturity. So first, you need to really establish a baseline. Like, where are we in terms of our maturity model, right? Are we in the infancy stage? Are we the child phase, the awkward teenager, or are we the adult phase? Because then you'll be able to measure KPIs according to where you're at. So, for instance, where I'm currently at in my company right now, we're still really in the infancy stages of our safety management system. So you cannot really expect to measure very specific data points because your infrastructure is not able to provide for those data points. So you have to really understand where you're at as a business, what your maturity level is. If you have a mature culture, safety culture, then you can measure leading and lagging indicators, right? I mean, I think you need a combination of both simply because, from a lagging indicator standpoint, and when I say lagging, I mean total recordable incident rates, lost time rates, that speaks to different businesses. So let's say, for instance, you are in construction. Other businesses that want to do work with you are going to be very interested in understanding what is your total recordable incident rate? What's your EMOD? Those are very, very tangible data points that the industry understands. Now, from a business standpoint, internally, I would be more interested in my leading indicators. I would be more interested in how many safety inspections have we conducted this month? How many near misses were reported? How many corrective actions were completed? Because that is directly connected to your lagging indicators. The more near misses you report, the less likely you'll have an incident as a result of that specific situation.
Most people don't understand that. That is the most powerful thing that people don't understand. The more near misses reported, which people would think that was a bad thing, it's a wonderful thing because people are aware that there was a near miss. There was almost an incident, but there wasn't. And if you are reporting those, people are paying attention, and therefore there won't be as many incidents. Most people, when they hear how many near misses were reported, they'd be like, "Oh, if that number's high, that's bad, right?" Like, no, that's actually really, really good. You want people to feel comfortable in reporting that number. So sorry, I didn't mean to stop you, but it's such a great point you just made there. It's like that is such an important thing, that all reporting of X is not a negative. It's not bad. There's a lot of reporting of things that actually show the good. So sorry, please. And did I just completely take you offline? If I did, I'm so sorry. But
No,
I
no
I
worries. No
just thought that was
worries.
such an insightful statement you made there.
No, I mean, you just answered the question, right? So if I were to focus on one KPI, it would be near misses because that gives you so much valuable information. Now, now it's not so easy to get people to report near misses. One of the things that's critical, and going back to my introduction and what I'm passionate about, is psychological safety. Creating an environment where people feel comfortable to report said near misses. And it's really complex. I mean, I think it's important to understand that safety is, and your safety maturity is not black and white. It's a journey right? And you have different phases. So anyone that's listening to this, I would really encourage them to understand where they're at in their safety journey, in their safety development, because according to where they're at, then they'll be able to implement certain tools to help you mature into a best in class safety management system.
Yeah. So it's funny you
And
should
that's
say
that.
that. I love that. Thank you. That's really, really, I think people are going to value that advice a lot. And it's why you're on here. So I appreciate it so much. I think that one of the things that folks, operators tend to feel is I either have to have all or nothing when it comes to resources. I can't afford to have a safety coordinator at every one of my facilities on payroll. I can't afford to have a full-time trainer at every one of my facilities for forklift, because forklift and heavy equipment tends to be the near miss area that is most often, any kind of machine. And one of the things that I always say is you're obligated or required by law to have once a year. Great. Except your turnover in these positions is like 400%, and when you have forklift operators, they tend to be nomadic in nature. Sometimes, with the environment of our current political culture, you get turnover for all sorts of reasons. And yet every one of those people has to be trained once a year. But it would be great if you hired everybody on January 1st and then you did the training on January 1st the next year. It doesn't work that way. And smaller organizations actually have an easier time than bigger organizations. And people don't realize that, because I can have a small organization, I can manage that relatively easily. I can find a trainer, I can have Joe come out and do the training, I can have somebody else come out. But if you have 50 locations with let's just say you're above average, you have 100% turnover. So you're just turning over all your people once. It's really hard to figure out who's been trained, who hasn't been trained. You have to get a quarterly program going, and ideally using Yellowbird. I'm just going to say it, but whatever it is, you should have resources that come out. You just have to choose one thing to really focus on improving. And in my opinion, I think you're dead on. I think near miss scenarios are probably the most low-hanging fruit opportunity to improve human incident, that and fall protection. Those are the two that, if you just focused on two things in this industry and really owned them and said, okay, I'm going to own this, I think we could make a real material change. I really do. So we've gone. I love this conversation. I could talk to you all day. This is fantastic. I hope you'll come back someday, and
Yep.
we'll do a different theme. We'll do a different discussion. You are actually in my town here in Phoenix, or I'm in your town in Phoenix, and so we could actually do it in person. We were going to, but I'm the guy who kiboshed it because I don't know how to do a recording in person. So
No worries.
yeah,
Next
so
time.
next time, but so. Couple of things. If somebody wants to connect with you just to follow your insights and so forth, what's the best way to do it?
Oh, LinkedIn. I'm right there.
Great. Yep. Yeah, you are everywhere. And I love that. If you're enjoying this episode, please share it with other people and show everybody how great Joe is. And obviously I really appreciate you doing this. And as a last takeaway, if you had a powerful message for the future of our industry, what would it be? What would you like to communicate to the future leaders in safety as they enter this?
What I would say, and without really giving it much thought, is never stop learning. Because as the subject matter experts, the business relies on you to be the subject matter expert. And if you stop learning, then you don't grow and then you don't add value. So never stop learning.
Love that. Love that. There's no better message to end with. So thank you so much. I look forward to seeing you around the community, and hopefully you will tell everybody to join Yellowbird as a pro. It's free, And honestly, it's wonderful to be able to have people make themselves available, whether you're employed or not, whether you consult or not. You can be on, and all you have to do is say no. If we invite you to a job, you can say, I don't want to do it, and that's okay. That's my whole objective is no penalty for people saying no, because I just want to give the invite. I don't care if you say yes or not. We'll find the right person. So, all right. Well, thank you so much, and I am going to wrap. Have a wonderful day. That's it for today's episode of the Canary Report. If this conversation helped you reframe how you think about risk and safety, please do me a favor. Hit subscribe, leave a review, and share it with somebody who needs to hear it. We're building a new category of safety and risk leadership, one that's faster and smarter. Leaders who aren't just empowered by tech, but whose wisdom is accelerated by it. To learn more about how Yellowbird's cutting-edge platform is empowering leaders to solve workplace safety and risk challenges faster, smarter, and at scale, visit goyellowbird.com. Don't forget to subscribe to our Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and Yellowbird pages to stay up to date. Until next time, lead with clarity, know first, and act fast.